Hello, everyone. Good evening and welcome to the Cadets webinar series. We have an unbelievable group of panelists here tonight, and our topic is going to be Emerald Marquis and the mark that that iconic color guard has made and still continues to make on the pageantry activity of both WGI and DCI. My name is Denise Bonfiglio. I am the CEO of Cadets Arts and Entertainment and the director of the Cadets. And my history with Emerald Marquis, I taught that Emerald back in the 80s, 84 and 85 was their pirate year. And then I came back to teach the Guard starting in 1990 and continued on with Emerald until their final year of 2001. And during that window of time, in the 80s, I was teaching the Lancers. In the 90s, I was teaching cadets. And then eventually ventured off to California with all of my friends here. And so we're going to be talking about the life cycle of Emerald Marquis. And when I moved out to, top in California, I brought all these folks with me, and we continue to create iconic color guard programs out in, on the West Coast. So I'd like to introduce each of you to our panelists tonight. We have Carol Abahab-Tav, John Vandekoff, Greg Regola, Dale Powers, and Jim Moore. We were the kind of group of staff. There were many staff that taught Emerald Marquis through the years, but we're here together because this group of people, most of us, taught for 20 plus years together, from coast to coast, pretty much. But we're going to have an opportunity for you to meet each person here, each individual here, learn a little bit about their history of both Drum Corps and Winter Guard, and what they're doing today. So, Carol, you are first. Introduce yourself and talk about your history in DCI, WGI, and what it is that you're doing today.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here with everyone. This is so cool. It's like family having a reunion. And yeah, so I started out on the East Coast in the Lancers. Denise was one of my first instructors in the big time in DCI. And then I went on into color guards out there, and I started migrating west through dance and things that brought me over there along the way. Oh my gosh, it's too much. But, I met Jim in spirit and, went to California to grad school and taught the Santa Clara Vanguard. And from there, I met Denise again. And she asked me to come out to Emerald in 98. And I spent from 98 to 2001 with Emerald. And then in 2013, I went with these guys to Bluecoats. And let's see, what else? I'm sure there's, I've been there ever since. Yeah, so that's it in a nutshell. Yeah, long history.
Didn't you do a little performance in State Street Review along the way?
Oh my goodness. Okay, all the you want to, so Erte.
Put it out there.
Yes, okay. Erte and Quasar Erte, and then Billy Gerberg and Nancy Keefe and I drove a station wagon via kind of vacation like, and halfway across the country. And that's where I stopped in Madison for State Street and taught there for many years after, and ended up doing my undergrad there just by chance, and got, furthered everything in my pageantry career to focus toward dance from Madison on. So yes, that was the biggest instrumental with Sal and giving me my first opportunity, and Scott, both at State Street and Spirit, Scott Chandler.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Thank you, Carol. Dale?
There we go. Sorry. Thanks, Denise, for doing this. This is really wonderful. I when we were talking before, I said how nice it is to see everybody all at once. We all see each other all the time, but we probably collectively haven't been together in many, many years, as you said. A little bit about myself. I started in drum corps back in 1969 into 70 in the 27th Lancers organization. I was in the 17th Lancers, which was a drum corps that lasted only about 8 months. And I remember when they folded, Denise's father called my mother and said, take them to Norwood. And then I went to the 21st Lancers and then up to the 27th Lancers. And I grew up through that organization, but that's where I met Denise. We marched together in 1973 in the 27th Lancers. And after I got out of the service, I went in the military. I ended up marching with, finishing and teaching the Defenders, and stayed involved in drum corps all the way through. I taught the Lancers in the 80s. I taught the Skyriders. I wrote their drill when they did the Sound of Music here. And then I did some great little Division 2 and 3 corps, the Rochester Patriots, East Coast Jazz. And actually that's where I first met John. He was teaching the Ventures and I was teaching the Patriots. And it was just, you know, being in the same place at the same time. Those are the first times that I met John. I got my start in Winter Guard. I was teaching the Defenders, and a good friend of mine, his sister marched in a drill team. And back in the 70s, drill teams were the rage around here. And he said his sister's drill team needed a drill writer. And I said, I don't know what a drill team is. And he said, well, they have lots of kids, so just split them up into 3 groups and you'll have a color guard, and treat some like a drum line and some like a drum corps. And that's how I started getting involved in color guard, because I saw these color guard kids and I wanted to learn how to do what they were doing, because I couldn't tell them what was wrong. So I self-taught myself how to spin, not well, but enough so that I could kind of understand things. But from that, I ended up going on and teaching the little high school color guard called the West Bridgewater Wildcats. And I knew enough to teach them just what they needed to know. And in 2 years, they were the first WGI Class A champion. And that was in 1980. And that was the first time WGI went to 2 classes. And I brought this little color guard that only had 4 high school kids. The rest were all middle school kids. And we beat the Millers Blackhawks and all of these other big name color guards, but it was these cool little kids that knew how to spin. And you know, people used to say, well, those little kids from Boston, they come out of the womb spinning, and they're little cadet kids, and they're better than most. And that's the way it really was then. But that's how I really got into color guard. From there, what happened was really just in 1981, the state of Massachusetts put forth a referendum called Proposition 2.5. And Proposition 2.5 basically cut all the music programs and most of the arts programs across the state. I had this little high school color guard that got cut, and there were 2 other high schools in the area that also the programs got cut. I was teaching the Defenders Drum and Bugle Corps, and there was a bunch of girls that had come to march in the Defenders who were in a drill team called the St. Francis Sanchonettes, and they used to have a winter guard, but they no longer had a place to go. So I decided to start this winter guard for a place for all of the kids from my high school to go, and these kids from the drum corps I was teaching to go, to be in a winter guard. And I wasn't really sure how it was gonna take off, but on the first day I had 28 people. Interestingly enough, only 4 of them came from all the high school programs, but I had all these kids from the drum corps that wanted to be in winter guard. And so at the end of the first rehearsal, or shortly before, I knew I had to come up with a name. I had all of these kids that wanted to do this. So how the name came about, it's really a fun story. Back in the day in drum corps, there was a newspaper called Drum Corps News. It was the drum corps world was around, but Drum Corps News was the big paper. And they used to have a spread in the middle, and it was called the score page. And it was the scores from every place around the country. So to come up with the name, I just started writing down the names of all the drum corps that I liked, their name, and then I started cross-referencing the names. So Emerald Marquis is a combination of the Emerald Cadets from New Haven, Connecticut, and the Marquis Fond du Lac from Wisconsin. And I crossed the 2 names, and that's how I came up with it. Had nothing to do with green, had nothing to do with the shape of the stone. It was 2 drum corps that I liked their names and came up with the Emerald Marquis. I stayed involved teaching drum corps through the first, I think, 8 or 9, maybe 10 years of Emerald Marquis. But after a while, I was doing marching band, drum corps, color guard, and like everybody else back then, you talk to, people like Mickey Kelly, Sal Salas, George Zangali, all those people. We were all funding it ourselves any way that we could. Everybody was doing whatever it was. But Emerald Marquis was a pretty special place. We were from the South Shore. My first funny story about Denise, and I'm sure I'll have many, was I made a deal with Denise that we worked out this deal together, that she would come teach Emerald Marquis if I would go teach the 27th Lancers. So I had to teach the drill for the color guard for the 27th Lancers in the summer in exchange for her coming and teaching the Emerald Marquis in the winter. Denise was working full-time in Boston, but you had to understand where the Lancers were located in Revere. To people in Revere, if you had to cross over the bridge, to travel to the South Shore, that was like a family vacation. I mean, they didn't, but Denise would leave and have to drive to teach Emerald Marquis twice a week because I already taught the drum corps in the summer. And there was many a times that she would teach, she would do sectionals, she'd look at the schedule and she'd say, okay, I've got an hour and a half drive home, see you later. She wouldn't stick around for run-throughs or whatever. When her time was done, she was gone. But it also helped in a lot of ways because she also opened up a connection between a lot of kids that came down, after that. Billy Gerberg came from up there, Freddie Bateman came from up there. There were a lot of wonderful people from the North Shore that, because we became pretty good pretty fast, decided that it was a decent place to go. And Denise brought a lot of credibility to the program. Emerald Marquis was 7 months old when they went to their first WGI. And they came in 8th in the country, and we tied the Cavaliers in equipment that year. And I still have that sheet. And the only reason I kept it really is because Mary Berkeley actually judged that show, and Mary Berkeley being one of the premier equipment judges in the country then. So it kind of took us down a road where we had some instant credibility and we started to get some really good kids. What was interesting about Emerald Marquis is when we started the first year, we had one boy in the color guard, Donnie Janess. But I think it allowed a lot of the same people that I mentioned earlier, Rob Hooper, Michael Diamond, a lot of those people to know that there was a place where boys could go and march. And so we ended up starting to attract people that would not only come because the color guard was decent, but because it was a place where males could go and spin as well. And there weren't a lot of places with those options around. So having good staff people there, as well as being a place where people could go that there was nowhere else, it really brought us really quick to a point of respectability and prominence. In those first, 8 or 9 years, I was doing most of it myself. I was running it and staging it and writing a lot of the work, but I had some really great people that helped me, not every year, not all the time, but in the early years, Michael Doran Grisha was around and helped out a lot. Sadie Wallace, Wanda Conway, Eric Heath. There were some wonderful people that, were helping develop the program. And I didn't realize that the color guard was as highly as thought of as they were, especially in those early years, until I think it was 1986. And we were having a really rough year. And Shirley Whitkin called me and asked me if I would bring the color guard to Dayton early, and I could get a load of this. I could practice in UD Arena for the day, as long as she was going to have a judges clinic, and she was going to use us as the judges clinic for the day. So we would practice live. She would say, can you stop and do this? Can you do that again? And she was teaching people how to judge, watching the Emerald Marquis live. It was pretty cool because we got 6 hours of practice in UD Arena, and it helped quite a bit. But that was the first time that I went, I kind of feel like maybe we're getting a little bit of respect. And remember, when this whole thing started, the Skylarks were right up in our neighborhood. Blessed Sacrament was here, and even throughout the Northeast, there were the Royal Guardsmen were really good. Conquest was still around, and in Boston was one of those places where on any given day you could win or you could come in fourth. And for the longest time in Easton, Mass, the circuit up here, they only announced the top 3 people. So there would be a show with St. Anthony's, Blessed Sacrament, Emerald Marquis, 27th Lancers, or Adonis, or go through the list. And we won 1 week, and then all of a sudden we didn't hear our name announced for 2 weeks because we came in 4th and 5th the weeks after that. So it was pretty cutthroat. But what it did was it made all of us better every single week. It was really hard. But there were 2 years, I think. I think there were 87 or 88 and 89 or 87 and 88, where there were 5 world-class color guards from Boston that made finals at WGI. So it really pushed us, but it was difficult. You had to be ready and you had to be good. And it was a different time back then. It was a different type of color guard, but that we developed really fast at it. I learned early on that I was only going to be able to take the color guard so far. In 1988, we came in 4th. We lost to Blessed Sacrament doing that Laurie Anderson telephone show. And we lost out kind of at the end. And that was when I kind of went, you know what, I need to get help. There's certain things that I just can't do, and you can't do it all yourself. Mickey Kelly actually said to me one time, find some people that will come in and make your weaknesses stronger, and don't ever be afraid of surrounding yourself with good people. This is your color guard, and it'll always be your color guard. But find people that can help you take your color guard to the next level. And I never forgot that, because the years that the Skylarks were really good, he had Jeff Namian and Scott Chandler in there helping him. So, he kind of talked me through a lot of that about how, we all have strengths, and collectively you can get people with individual strengths and you can make a great team. And that's kind of what happened, towards the end of the 80s. I started to ask around. I had Tommy Keenum come in a couple of times and work with us, I think at the end of 87. And then I was interested in having Tommy be around a little bit more, but he lived in Mississippi, and it really wasn't something that I really wanted to, or nor could we afford to, bring him in all the time. Yes.
Before you go into the 90s and unveil who it was that you brought in there, because God knows I got some questions for you through the 80s.
Okay.
So hold on to that thought for 1 minute. Let's get the rest of these guys to introduce themselves, and then we are coming right back to you, Dale, because I'm sure that I've got some funny questions for you, actually. Hey, Greg.
Hi, everybody. Hi.
Hi, Gregory.
Hi. Denise, thank you so much for organizing this. Like Carol said earlier, it's like a family reunion and it's amazing. So it's great to see everybody. So I kind of lost track of so it's basically the background DCI and then.
Yeah, what are you doing with your history in Drum Corps International?
Yeah, so.
And what do you do professionally, Greg?
Yeah, well, I'm a fashion designer professionally and have been since I moved to New York in '84 to pursue that career, and I've been here ever since. So yeah, so that's what I do, and I'm certainly engaged in that now, although the virus has not made that easy in the past couple months. But anyway, so yeah, I do that. It's interesting. I think I had this conversation with somebody recently. My background with DCI is very unusual. Probably nobody else has this kind of background because I didn't march. I never marched in junior corps. So what happened was I was obsessed with drum corps in the 70s. I grew up around a drum corps in my small town in Pennsylvania. But, my family, for one reason or another, I couldn't do it, or I was either working or something. And also, as some people know, back in those days, most drum corps were either all female, or you had the color guards, or you had the 2 male color guards, the Scouts and Cavaliers, with the exception of a few other drum corps, like North Star, I think, was a mixed color guard, and I think Sky Riders and a few others. But I never lived anywhere close to drum corps that I could easily participate in. And so, I tried to figure it out, but then I went to school at Penn State, and that was in the middle of Pennsylvania, which was so far away from drum corps. Every summer, I would be thinking, oh my God, I want to do this, but it was one thing or another. It was extra credits I had to get because I knew I was going to go on to schooling after Penn State and all that jazz. So anyway, I never marched in junior corps, but so ironically, after I technically aged out, I was still in Pennsylvania getting ready to come to New York. So I ended up marching senior corps because I thought, well, that I can do. I can figure that out. It's a weekend gig, right? So I marched with the West Shoremen in 1983. And then I marched with, I took 84 off. I was doing I was working at a summer theater in Maine, 84. And then 85 through 88, I marched in the Sunrisers and had an amazing time. And I met lifelong friends. And yeah, so it was amazing. So, but I will say one thing, I technically kind of did march in Junior Corps because I did participate in the once more 94 27th Lancers with Denise and her sisters and all these people, I mean, amazing people. And thank God I was on the Friends and Family Plan. So it was just, I was so honored. And so, yes, I kind of marched Junior Corps, but it was an amazing experience. It was, if I was going to march in one situation, that was it. So I'm grateful for that. And so my story with, so how I got involved, then it's too long a story to tell, but what happened was in 1980, let me think. I was marching in Sunrisers, and I met Zingali because he would sometimes come in at the end of after DCI was over and DCA kept going on. He would come, Mark Sylvester, Jerry Cardino, they would come down sometimes, and just kind of fluff up the Corps, and try to get us better for DCA finals. And I think that's what started it. Jerry Cardino, I think he may have been the first one. It was either Jerry or George, one of them. He saw me there. He saw that I was writing for them, and I think what happened was I think Jerry or Zingali gave my name to Hopkins at the end of the 88 season for cadets because, and I don't know why or wherefore, but I think Hopkins was just not going to hire the same staff. He was on a kick about hiring other people for the Guard, and so I ended up. Long story, but it was a lot of back and forth. And I ended up going to camp in 89 for the cadets. And I think I may have met Denise that first camp. I think it was, and Peggy. And I was, oh my God, I was so scared. Talk about legends. I walked into a gym with these two women. I was beside myself. I almost just walked out and said, forget, I'm not doing this. I'm not qualified. Who am I? But anyway, to their credit and to the organization's credit, they let me stand in front of the kids, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I had a great time. And I remember, I'll never forget quickly, Denise, I think it was April might have said something, or Mark might have said something to her, but I remember her saying something like, he's going to be fine. Somebody told me that she said something like that about me, my future with that organization in terms of being a choreographer. And then that was it. I was there for a while. And so basically my career in DCI is one of teaching, not of marching. And then, and actually that's how I got into, and through that, then I think Denise mentioned me to Dale after the 89 Emerald Marquis season, I think, right? And then, because we had worked together in the summer of 89, so going into the 90 season for a Winter Guard, she said, why don't you come, I talked to Dale about you, why don't you come to teach the Emerald Marquis? And that was how I got to Emerald. And ironically enough, the first weekend I came to, Dale will vouch for this, the first weekend I came to teach, Dale folded the color guard. So you can imagine how I felt. It's like, what did I do? Whatever. So he folded the color guard, long story, but we ended up resolving whatever those issues were. And I'm sure Denise and Dale can talk more about that, but Zingali was going to be teaching and myself. And so there's big changes in the staff, as Denise mentioned earlier, big changes. And of course, Denise as well. So yeah, so I was with Emerald from 90 through the end, although I think in 2000, I kind of stepped back that year. I needed a break. And then, and then I taught, and then of course I went to Vanguard after that. I took a number of years off, and then they kindly invited me to work with the Vanguard Winter Guard in 2009 was my first year. And then stayed with that program to the end as well. And then, yeah, teaching cadets. And then I moved to Bluecoats in 2013 with my dear friends. And yeah, I've been there since. So that's the long and short of it.
So awesome. So many stories. But we'll get back to you too, Greg. Jim Moore.
Hi, everybody. Oh my gosh, this is like, I feel like we should all be in the Wakefield Armory right now, putting something together. But it's so great to see everybody. Well, I guess my story started, I was a trumpet player back when I was in high school. I thought I was going to be a musician, but my sister was in the rifle line in the high school, and I picked it up, and I started as a backyard Betty. And I kind of, Spirit of Atlanta was the closest drum corps to my house, which is 6 hours away. And so I auditioned as a horn player and as the color guard, and I ended up having, luckily, Scott and Tam and Sal, those guys, picked up the backyard Betty. So that was kind of how the career started with marching. I did 4 years there, 85 through 88. And then I marched State Street in 89. And then that led to just starting to teach a little bit. I started teaching. I did help Spirit of Atlanta in 90. Carol taught me for a few years at Spirit of Atlanta. So we go back there. But 90, I helped Spirit of Atlanta a little bit. Then I kind of moved to the West Coast. I started teaching the Kingsmen with Sal and Carol and those guys for a year. And then, funny story, I ended up getting hired to the Cadets through that gig because I was living in an apartment with Ray Otani and Johnny Amos and a bunch of people. And I was a kid. I was still a young kid. And Johnny was on the phone with April Gilligan, and I could hear their conversation. And I was across the room, and April all of a sudden said that, we need somebody to write the equipment, write the weapon work for the Cadets. From across the room, I went, I'll do it. And literally, that's kind of how this started. April goes, wait, is that kid that worked with Mark at Center Grove in 90? She's like, yeah, that's him. And so that's kind of how I ended up at the Cadets. I did that 91 through 95. And then after that, I went over and started doing the brass theater stuff with John and James Mason and all those guys. We did brass theater in 96, 7, 8, or at least I did, which of course turned into Blast, and did Blast for years and years and years, performing and choreographing. And through that, with the drum corps thing, I ended up leaving drum corps in 95 to pursue the theater stuff. And I kind of ended up getting my way back into it in 2005. Leon May called, and he's like, hey, let me Crown, would love for you to come, do the movement for the horn line and do things like that. And I was like, oh man, I don't know, kind of done, and so I ended up saying yes and going in to do that. So I did the horn line movement for Crown from 2005. I skipped those 6 all the way up till 2014. Then I'm skipping around a lot, but and then 92, I remember Dale coming by a rehearsal somewhere in Boston. I think we were at Boston College, and Dale goes, hey, you want to go get something to drink? I'm like, sure. He's like, how would you like to teach him a Marquis? I was like, yes, of course I would. I want to do this. So I started teaching him Marquis 92 through 99, and then again in 2000 for the final season. Through all that, with Pride of Cincinnati with Mike and those guys, Mike Gaines and the crew, and also a lot of high schools. I was with John at Northview High Schools back in the mid 90s when we did all that, and Carroll High School. Also in 99, Mike invited me over to start with the Aimachi family. So we started doing Aimachi, and kind of been doing that ever since. Any project that they have, I'm involved over there. And now with the Blue Coats, where it kind of ended up, and I guess that's kind of the story where it is now. Oh, SCV, Winter Guard for 10 years or whatever and all that. But yeah, that's kind of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim. And John.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey,
Like this call could go on forever. You know what I mean? You think about all the years and all the stuff everybody's done. I mean, Dale, I was ready to just tuck myself into bed. Like it was awesome. Like, and I don't mean that like it made me sleepy, Dale. I was like, holy crap. Like, I don't know all this stuff and I should know all this stuff and all the detail. I mean, it's fascinating to me. Yeah, you should write all that down, Dale. It's really cool. Anyways, hi, everyone. Thank you for having me on, Denise, with all my friends here. All my friends, yeah. So my started the career part, or just like the whole gist of things. The gist of things, I mean, I was a drum corps baby pretty much around drum corps up in Canada, from Canada. Since I was about 3 years old, I was a mascot. My dad was the director of the Dutch Boy Cadets. And then he started at All Girl Corps, the Ventures. So I was on the road with him all the time. And then he passed away and I stayed with the Ventures a few more years. And then eventually I decided to march. I didn't ever really want to march because it was a good gig. What I had going across the country and just having a good time and hanging out with all these awesome young women. Anyways, then I went to march with a local corps called the Kiwanis Cavaliers for a couple of years, and then I went to cadets, and that was just changed everything. That's where I met George. This is '85. I met George and I met Mark. Just pretty much changed my whole everything. Those two guys, for sure. So I was with them '85, '86, '87. Then I marched there, and unlike most, I didn't want to go on and teach there. I went back to my ventures and I started because I wanted to write. I was inspired to design. So I went back to the ventures and tech for a year with my friend Trevor. And then the next year I started writing. So I started writing for them. I guess it was 88, 88, something like that. And I wrote for them for 4 years. And then, so fast forward to 1992, I came on board. I'm sure many other people, drill writers, have heard the story, but I came in '92 to co-write the show with the cadets with Mark Sylvester. Of course, you know, it didn't happen, but I was there to tech anyways. And that's where I met Jim. Actually, I remember meeting Jim the year before in 1991 when they did this ballad, and I was just blown away with it. And yeah, that's when I first met him. Dale, I don't remember meeting you when I was with the Ventures. That sucks. I don't know when that was, like what year that would have been, but those were good times. So we're up to 92. And I remember in 92? Oh, so then after that, that was a one and done at the cadets. It was just didn't work out for me. So then I went over to Star and I wrote for Star, and that's when I met Billy Gerberg. And also during this whole time, I was living in Revere. I was going to school. I moved to Boston, go to school at New England Conservatory. So I started to get, so I'm still kind of close with George and with Mays and Golly and all those guys. And there was a big connection between Star and George, obviously, and Boston and all that too. So I wrote for Star. And then Dale, hang on, something's wrong here.
You actually
Is it 92 that I met you?
You did. You used to come to watch rehearsal when we were in the building.
Okay. Oh, but hang on. It's before that. In 92, not having a greatest summer of my life, but the one bright spot, we were at Fairleigh Dickinson University. And out of the blue, Dale Powers, the Dale Powers of Emerald Marquis, who now I knew everything about, came up and asked me if I'd be interested in writing for you. And I was just blown away because I have absolutely no experience, zero experience in writing for a Winter Guard. And that was like the highlight. I was so nervous and excited. That's what happened. And then, but the year before, you're right, my girlfriend was marching in Emerald, and I would come all the time and lurk on the side and check it all out. Yeah, that's funny. So anyway, so then I did it, and I did 93, and I'm sure 93 was my first year at Emerald. I'm sure we'll talk about that, but it was probably the worst. It was not awesome for me. The Guard was phenomenal. Just the learning curve was ridiculously brutal. But I stayed there. I stayed there in 93, 94, all the way to 99. And then Jim and I went off and did Blast. And then came back a little bit in 2001 to help with the music, and a couple, I don't really remember, Dale, if I came in a couple times or it was all remote. I don't know. I don't remember in the last year. It was Malagueña, right? Wasn't that? Yeah.
It was.
Anyways, you'll have to fill us in. It was, yeah.
And
then,
yeah.
What's that? With Jeff?
I said Jeff was here all the time, but you came in a few times. Yeah.
Did I? Okay. I don't remember if we were back in the States by then, but I guess we would have been. Yeah. And then I was just all Blast for a long time until Denise called me. She was now with Vanguard, and they want to start a Winter Guard. So by this time with Blast, I was pretty much just setting the same show over and over again. So it sounded like a great opportunity. And so we went there, and Jim and I and Carol were all at SCV, and that was awesome. And we were there for 10 years. Was it 10? Denise, 10, 11, something like that. Yeah. And then Bluecoats. I did Madison for 3 years, and then Jim and I went to Bluecoats with Carol, and then Greg, and that takes us to today. I think that's right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. You know,
Denise,
yeah.
I wanted to say one thing about too about how I met you, and
sure.
or not how about how I met you, but when I went to Vanguard first in 96, my next year, 97, is when it was Mark Metzger and I by ourselves. And I was freaked out. And we were both freaked out. So we brought Denise in because she was the master cleaner and she was the master at everything. And then that was the next year. You said, why don't you go out to Emerald? So I forgot about all that and memory, age, and all that. Yeah. So I wanted to thank you for that because that's when I met Dale, although we had all been competing against each other for a long, long time.
Yes, we were. So, my career started in the Icy Reveries Junior Drum and Bugle Corps way back, way back. And while I was there, my father started the Lancers, and he wouldn't allow me to join the Lancers because I was too young. So I stayed there for a year or two, and then, started marching the Lancers in 1971. And I marched with Dale, actually, later on. And but I was also I was teaching at the same time. I was teaching the 27th Lancers Cadets had a drill team. Dale, you were talking about a drill team, and they had a drill team, and I taught the drill team like I did their whole show. Their drill and their form. They would march around on the football field, spinning flags, and it was like indoor, outdoor. You had music that was played and that the kids marched around with, and it was literally the indoor activity on the outside on the football field. So I did that, and actually the Lancer Cadets were super good. That was Stephen Kovitz and Ann Fields, and they just did an unbelievable job with them. And I remember that my first time teaching Winter Guard outside of the Lancers was the St. Anthony's Imperials. And, I was asked to come into St. Anthony's to teach them. And for those that know St. Anthony's Imperials, they were like the epic color guard that, those kids literally looked like they had hands of death, they were unbelievable spinners, So I went to their first rehearsal and to realize that all of them, they were teaching themselves. They were that good teaching themselves. They had never really had anybody come in to teach them how to do anything. They taught themselves, so it was, so from that aspect, it was eye-opening, to see how they were able to go about what they did and how well they were trained and their focus and all of that. So anyway, I got an opportunity and I worked with St. Anthony's for a couple of years. And then I think it was Jerry Corradino said, you're going to come over and teach the Blessed Sacrament color guard. So I taught Blessed Sacrament for a little bit. And I think I taught them the year that they finally got into WGI, and that was the Boer year. They had a penalty or something on a Boer. They had a Boer on, and then I taught them their first year of Rockwood Sack, and fun year. And then after that, I left because it was the first time. Dale talked about how competitive it was in Boston. There was so many independent world color guards in Boston, and they were all so good, one after the other, up the other. And, all of us that were teaching the Lancers, myself and George and Peggy and Stephen and Jerry, we were all teaching different Winter Guards. Every single one of us were teaching different guards. We were competing against each other every weekend. And at the end of, Saturday night, someone's winning, someone's losing. Dale, as you talked about how one week you come in first, the next weekend you come in fifth or whatever. The show would get over on Saturday night, would all come back to my place, and there'd just be a big fight for 15 minutes, as to why whoever won shouldn't have won. And, we'd go back and forth with each other, myself, Peggy, George, and then we'd get it all out of our system for 15 minutes, and then we were done. And it was just a party. After that, this happened every single weekend, But in 1983, it was the first time that we decided that we were all going to teach together. Now, we were all teaching the Lancers in the summertime, and together. But it was going to be the first time that we were all going to teach together. And and we taught Quasar in 1983. And that color guard was so ridiculously clean, crazy clean. They were so clean they're almost boring, you know what I mean? Because they were so proficient at everything that they did, right? It was just amazing experience. And then Dale's right, I made a deal with him, you come teach the Lances in 1984, and I'll come teach your color guard, the Emerald Marquis, for nothing, right? But prior to that, Emerald Marquis, so I competed against Emerald for years, in Boston, and I would watch them, and they were like machines, these kids, they would throw their equipment across the gym like it was like you were, blowing a feather or something. They were just so good at exchanges. And I remember I was standing against the wall in the gym with Zingali, and we were watching the Emerald Marquis, and they put a release out there with their saber, and bang, it was out of their hands, dead stop in their hands. I said, how do they do that? They made it look so incredibly easy and simple. Literally, myself and Zingali just looked at each other. It's like, are you kidding me? But they were back then, just so good, so good, so talented. And so I did a little bit of, I taught lots of different places, through my years, after that. But I did eventually end back up at Emerald Marquis in 1990. And I was there with Emerald from 1990 until the end, until their last year. But in the midst, I was also still teaching drum corps. So I taught the Lancers still, and my dad folded the corps in 1986, and then went to the Cadets, 1987 to 1997. And I so remember that phone call, Carol, when you called me and said, Denise, you need to come to California. I said, I don't need to come to California. That's 3,000 miles away. What am I going to do for you out in California? No, you need to come and teach the color guard. You need to come and teach the Vanguard color guard. And I said, that's crazy. You only have to be, I said, I work every day. No, you get in a plane on Friday, you go home on Sunday. So anyway, I finally went out for a weekend to teach the Santa Clara Vanguard. And there it was, Carol and Mark. That was it. There were nobody else, just the two of them teaching the whole color guard. So anyway, that's what I got to meet Mike McCool and Myron and all those, and they basically weren't going to let me leave California to go back to Boston, So anyway, I ended up at the Vanguard. I left Cadets after 97 and taught the Vanguard through 99, and then went back to the Vanguard in 2003 and taught them till 2018. So, and in the midst of that, in between that and after teaching Emerald Marquis, I started the Santa Clara Vanguard Winter Guard up again. They used to have a Winter Guard back in the 60s. And so myself and David Meikle actually started the Winter Guard program up in 2006. And I told him, David, I said, well, I got to bring my friends here. They're all going to come. So anyway, I started calling these guys and say, hey, I started up the Vanguard Winter Guard. What do you think? And they said, all right, we'll give it a shot. So anyway, introducing, and at that time, San Jose Raiders had folded at the end of 2005 season. And so there was nothing in the Bay Area. So it was a great opportunity for there to be an independent World Guard there. So anyway, the Santa Clara Vanguard Winter Guard was kicked off in 2006, and we had a run at that until 2016, actually. So anyway, let's go back to Dale, because I want to go back to your stories to the 80s, because Dale, you talked about how, you taught yourself to spin, like, we all experience like the backyard spinners, right? But you were one of them. But you would teach, you taught the guard, you staged the guard, you did the equipment, you did the body, like you were like the one guy show with that color guard for like years.
Yeah, I had some people that would come in and help. They were, I knew enough to get us to a certain point, but I knew I needed more help.
Yeah.
The first person, I had Michael Dorn-Grischer and Eric Heath helping me, on and off. And they both marched in the kilties, and they were pretty crazy. So they kind of brought a little different flavor to the group. it wasn't always well accepted. You know, the original charter members of the color guard were, I mean, they had shirts made at one point, I remember, or some of them did, that said, dancing we don't, dancing we won't. I mean, it was, we're gonna stand at attention, we're gonna spin. Okay, we can spin under our leg, we can do that type of stuff, but we're not gonna dance. And the big turning point in the organization was in '85. And it was Shirley and Mickey Kelly that told me I should start thinking outside the box. And I forget the words they used, but we did the Pirates of Penzance show. And that was the year that Erte was in existence. And we never lost to Erte. We beat Erte every single show, regionals, you know, and the first time we lost to them was at Easton Mass Finals the weekend before Dayton. And I remember, you know, because everybody told us we were doing the right thing, but when I looked at Erte and then State Street at the time, I knew that we had just put lipstick on a pig. It really wasn't what it really needed to be. It was still great kids from Emerald Marquis that could spin that we put in a costume, you know, and had some different music. So that was when I started trying to think of who I could get to help me. Wanda Conway came in and she brought in Sadie. So I remember Sadie was the first one that was going to teach us, you know, how to dance or move. And we used to warm up to the Jane Fonda workout tape in a circle, you know, and then and then Sadie would do things with us as much as she could get them to do. But it was, you know, we were kind of trying to make that transition. And Sadie was a great person to do that, because she knew how far she could push them and what she could get away with. But when I first brought in Tommy Keenum, I really loved what he had done with the Skyriders, with the drum corps when they did the Wizard of Oz, and then the West Side Story stuff. And I thought he would have been a really good person. He actually helped me put together we did a Manhattan Transfer show, and we had these wooden dummies, cutouts on the side, and he actually had them dancing with these cutout dummies. They were their partners. And it was really a cool moment for us to see some things different. That's when I really started to realize that I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't take them any farther. The Emerald Marquis kids, the kids in West Bridgewater High School, I could teach them what I knew. But when I got to Emerald, when you have David Moore and Freddie Bateman and Joel DeBay and some of these, you know, crazy people that marched in Emerald, as good as they were, you know, they're light years better than I was, but I could tell them what I wanted, and then they knew they could make it work. So I guess they were writing it, but I was coming up with the ideas. It wasn't until the end of the 80s where I knew it was time for a bigger change. And George had actually come in and a couple of different times in the Malden Armory and worked with the Guard in '89. And then the transition to get George really was you, Denise, because he wasn't coming if you weren't there. You had just folded the Lance's Winter Guard. We hadn't taught together since the end of '85, I think. And after you folded the Lance's Winter Guard, that's when I called you and said, you know, will you come back and teach? I knew you weren't teaching anymore. I knew we still had the issue of you traveling over the bridge, but so I actually moved the color guard. We were rehearsing in Braintree, and Denise would only come on the nights we were in Braintree because Whitman was another 25 minutes.
That's right.
If we were in Braintree or Malden, Denise would come to rehearsal. If I said we were rehearsing in Whitman, Denise wouldn't come to rehearsal. But when I got Denise on board, that's when she said, I think George might be interested in doing a little bit more. And then that's how that transition actually happened. I mean, there were a lot of people that helped the color guard along the way through the 80s, but it was the Lance's Winter Guard folding that really kind of opened up that door, you know, and you know, we could tell stories forever about, you know, George trying to explain to me storyboarding how the Candide show was going to work, you know, and he's actually the one that he first asked me to bring in this guy to help do movement. Sadie was leaving, and I forget if she was going to school, but he convinced me to bring in Michael McLennan. And from there, then it transitioned into Greg, because they were good friends. They'd worked at Cadets together. So the transition there, you know, bringing in George really kind of led to, you know, we've got these other people, and, you know, would you give them a try? And sort of the rest is history. I remember the first year Greg came in, I was still writing things, and I still tell this story. I don't mean this in a bad way. I let Greg write a few things in 1990. And when you look at the videotape, you can go, oh, geez, that's really pretty clear. It was time to step aside at that point, the difference between the stuff that Greg was writing and the rest of it. So, but, and I could just see the relationship that he had and the way that he taught, and that it was interesting and it was something different. And that's what the kids, the guard transitioned in 1990. He's right. I folded the color guard. We were in the Braintree Armory, and I folded the color guard, and it was really about money. We had lost, we had a corporate sponsor through 88 and 89, and we'd lost the corporate sponsor. And, you know, I didn't know how we were going to keep the color guard alive. So it wasn't, contrary to popular belief, I think it was Pugsley or Denny or somebody said that I folded the color guard because George was going to make the color guard. The boys wore skirts and the girls wear pants in the Candide show. And they said, so Dale folded the color guard. But what happened was the color guard captain at the time was this girl, Michelle McQueen, Minnow. And she actually called all the kids and kept them together and called me at the end of the week and said, we'll do fundraisers and, you know, whatever we have to do, we'll pay dues. Because through the few years before that, the guard was pretty well off financially, and the kids weren't really asked to do a lot. So we put the color guard back together. Only one kid didn't come back. And then that was the basis of that Candide show. It was a lot of fun. It did have a hiccup along the way in that, but I think the only other time that I folded the color guard twice in 20 years. The other time was in 1997 when our bingo folded. And you know, it was one of those things where every time we ran into a problem, it was about money, you know. But how we all ended up together was really a trickle down from George, you know, introducing to one person and then another and then another. And you know, it just became as Sadie left, Michael came in, and when Michael left, then Jim came in, and you know, Sully actually came to me towards after 1990 and said that he wanted to teach the color guard. He actually told me he wanted to teach the color guard, and that was after George had gotten sick, and so Sully actually wanted to stage the guard. So, and that was pretty crazy too. Because George came, then Peggy came back to teach. So the staff at the time, the tech staff was Denise and Peggy and myself. Talk about a fish out of water, you know. And Mark, who, you know, we could tell stories about the scaffolding, the building, and Mark forever. But you know, that whole Kate Bush show, I remember being at the building when we had our own building, and I wasn't having anything to do with it. I couldn't see it or anything, but Peggy's the one that came to me and said, just trust me on this, just trust me on this. I think he's on to something. And that's the Kate Bush show then evolved, you know, from there, so.
Yeah, that was an iconic program for sure. You know, just, there's two things you know, just, so in 1990, the whole look of Emerald Marquis completely changed from a show design. And it kind of went from there, you know, from that year into, you know, 1991. And then 1992, John, I remember you coming to rehearsal, and I also remember that year was one of the most difficult shows I ever had to work with in my entire career. And I swore after that year, I would never teach another drum corps, color guard, anything that didn't have a tempo. It didn't have, you know, you can teach to silence. You can teach to silence, you know, silence is not easy, but you can teach to silence. But when you have music that has, you know, just its tempos are all over the place. And I remember you coming into our building and I said, John, please, please, please help me count this part of the music because it was the entire show. We had to make up counts. And it was a hit or miss whether or not the kids remembered what the tempo was at a certain part of the program. It was so hard, so hard.
We were making that up, Denise. I remember sitting there with a metronome at the table and figuring out how many counts it was. And then at various points in the show, whichever kids were at certain points in the center of the floor, they took over counting. So we had to teach them that metronome tempo. to make it work. And it wasn't always successful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was truly, it was a special year. It was a lot of talent in that color guard in 1992, and that was the year that Jim Galley passed away, actually. And
That's right. I remember that because I was at school in New England, conservatory, and I would be over at the hospital all the time with George or at May's house, and Mark was doing Emerald, and and he did Amazing Grace, and we all have our reasons why he may have chosen that. He probably denies it, but it was all timely to me. And I remember him playing that piece for me. You know what I mean? The arrangement of it, and saying, "Well, what do you think?" and stuff like that. And I was like, "This is perfect." Sorry. It was though. It was so perfect, but I don't think people really realized. I think about like drum or Winter Guard over the last few years and how a lot of people really explore with that. But that show to me is like iconic for getting rid of everything that held color guard together at that time, and it just like poof. You know what I mean? And those kids they were so amazing. They were so amazing, and the choreography. It just blew me away. That's what I remember that.
Yeah. Even the very beginning, we got some heat because it was a lot of, it was a long time that the music just played and you were looking at a stark stage, the members were,
how inspiring that is though to this day. That's still a moment that I remember, that uncomfortableness, you know what I mean? And we spend so much of our activity, music. Well, let's just stop and actually say, this is the music. And then we're going to go. Yeah. I was so brilliant. Yeah.
And the other part of that, John, was, Sully insisted that we have a blue floor with blue uniforms and blue props. And then on top of that,
can you just hear Amazing Golly and
actually, I have to correct you slightly, Dale. Sorry. That was actually upon my assistance because well, I could tell stories forever about that year because it was such a crazy year. There's so many crazy, sort of going out on a limb things. But I remember it what do you call them? That was the beginning of I'll just say this real quick about that. That was not the beginning, but it was one of the first times. I don't know how to explain it for me because I guess maybe it had to do with the fact that I got on a plane and left town after rehearsal. But I was always dropping these bombs and doing things. But I always felt like, well, I'm just gonna go home on Sunday and then I don't have to think about it for another 5 days. Maybe it was just selfish. I don't know what it was. But that was the beginning of certain things. Mark and I sometimes, I remember, especially that year, we would sort of, I don't know, it was almost like a one-upmanship, how crazy it would be to do this. And I would say, oh yeah, well, what about if we did that? It was sort of, we incited each other a little bit, to be a little bit, to go out on a limb. And that's actually how that happened. And I thought, oh, no. Oh, I know what it was too. It was because I saw there was an animation piece and it was all just gestural strokes of flesh tones on a screen. And that's what that was. Originally, it was going to be, I wanted them to blend into the floor, but only their parts of their flesh, kind of like making lines. That's how that started. But anyway, at the Boston Regional, Denise, you'll remember, all of you might remember this. Denise's mom, Miss Patsy. Patsy said, and they were walking out of the Boston Regional after the show, and I think May I think it was Patsy said, Greg, you got to put some trim on those uniforms. It's blue on blue. How are you supposed to see that? It was so funny. And May said, yeah. They were these, and I think who else was there? There was three of them. Somebody else was with them. I can't remember.
It was Lucy.
Yeah, Lucy. And
the Golden Girls.
Lucy Patty, the Golden Girls. And I was like, and then of course I walked away dejected and thinking, oh my God, maybe I have messed up totally. What am I gonna do? But then, like I said, I got on a plane and forgot about it until the next weekend. So maybe that's how I got away with some stuff. I don't know. But anyway, in the long run, but Mark would support that kind of thing, even if neither one of us knew. We liked the not knowing. That's kind of what we fed on a little bit that time, in those times. And it happened. And then it also continued with John and Jim. Jim was there in 92. It was his first year too. So we were all somehow, I don't know if it's because we influenced each other in some way, but we always, I think, had a bit of a hive mind when it came to that kind of thing. I think we've always been comfortable with the unknown, right? I think that's kind of one of the manifestations of that, the early manifestations of all that. But anyway, back to you, Dale, sorry.
Well, the other thing I was going to tell you, that the Lucy and Patsy and May story was, if you remember, they had the uniforms that year, and they were the one piece, jumpsuit with the long flowing legs. And then all of a sudden you wanted to buy these bodysuits they were going to wear underneath. So we bought these bodysuits, and I couldn't quite understand why we were buying bodysuits, but all of a sudden we get to rehearsal, and Greg's over in the corner, everybody's got their bodysuit on, and he cuts a slit down in the material down the side of the legs of all the uniforms. And I said, "What are you doing?" I said, "We're never going to be able to sell these." And he goes, "Oh no, see those bodysuits? Now we're going to paint them, but it's going to be their flesh tone." And I said, "Why don't we just let it be their flesh tone? Why?" But it was all about, and I just
Oh my
didn't
God,
quite
that is so.
understand, but it was that what you had in your head at something. Do you remember that? Yeah. So
I do
that was
remember that, yes.
the other part of the story. Was they were all sitting at the building, I think. I think it was in the building, and Lucy called me over, and she goes, "This is your color guard. You got to step in. They're getting a little bit crazy here." She said, I think you need to step in and stop some of this." And then they would just sit there, and then they would just watch, until it was over.
So funny. So let's move on to 93, 94, actually. And the 94 guard, that's when we introduced kind of props, right? And I think the energy behind that was just kind of to create a stage for the performers. And I don't think that it wasn't a big year. I don't think we had a big yard that year. I don't think we had a lot of members.
No, I thought we were going to fold.
Right.
We came back, and Dale, we had like 7 kids at
Yeah.
that first rehearsal.
Our first rehearsal.
Because I made 93 so awful for everybody.
Well, you're right. We only had 7
Thank you.
vets come back, but and it was interesting. The very first rehearsal, John's girlfriend and the color guard captain, who had been there for 7 years, pulled me aside to tell me this just wasn't going to work, and I should probably consider throwing in the towel. And I was like, the last two people I think would tell me to throw in the towel. But that year, and 93 was probably the most talented color guard I ever taught, but it was also a really difficult year for a number of reasons. Not all because we were transitioning, to John. Those egos just clashed, and that group was never going to get along, no matter who was writing for them, because you had cadet kids fighting with non-cadet kids and all of that. But in 94, the outside people didn't really know that it wasn't a great year for us. So that was the year we got Andy Toth and David Bermudez and Scott Kasich. And so these kids all came to want to join the color guard.
Karen, wasn't that Karen's first year?
That was Karen's first year, yeah. So these kids all wanted to come and join the color guard, not knowing that it had just blown up, at the end of the year. And so it really was, I think we only had 6, 6, and 8 that year. Janine Mason was marching in the Sable Line that year. There was a lot of really talented people that were marching that came to join, not knowing what the internal stuff was like the year before. So, but you never knew the color guard was only 6, 6, and 8 because of the props. But I remember John saying, he promised me, in typical John fashion, if you allow me to stay, I promise I'll finish the show before the first show. We'll have uniforms before the first show. We'll have props before the first show. Little did I know that the props were going to be those curtains, and what it cost to make the frames and all of that stuff. But that was the transition into 94, yeah.
Yeah. That was a pretty special group of performers, just super, super talented. And again, the change in the program itself from 92, from that year, and then we step into now 1994. It was another dramatic change, I think, just from a program perspective.
You know what I remember, and I just want to say this, I think so much of that was driven by Jim.
Yeah.
When I came in 93, so much of, I was a drill guy, you know what I mean? And and they were drilling. If you look at the 93 show, they were just drilling like crazy. It's just, you know, trying to one up Mark Sylvester or something. I don't know. It was crazy, crazy, crazy. And I just remember getting, I think it was Jim, you must have been in Atlanta. I remember going to see you and you said, I just want us to be a dance company.
Mhm.
And it changed everything. It changed my whole outlook. All of a sudden it went more towards, for me personally, what I was actually studying in school and less about my history is, you know, in drum corps. But that's how I remember anyways, Jim.
Yeah, actually, you're spot on. I remember Dale flew you down to Atlanta so we could get together and talk and like just figure out what we need to do or what we want to do. And I remember thinking we were listening to a bunch of music, and I was in the middle of my ballet career in Atlanta, and so that was influencing me a lot. And I was like, I just want them to feel like a company. I wanted to feel like a stage show. I wanted a type of performance environment. I remember I was like, hold up. I think this, and then we started the conveyor belt thing. What if they never stop moving? And that's kind of was birthed actually. In Atlanta, we kind of came up. The part about that is what you don't was behind that show was the madhouse. I remember doing a sectional behind the curtains while the flags were running a section, and I'm back there writing something for the rifles, and they're like, all right, let's run it. And all of a sudden, the entire rifle line just stops because people are literally doing the 50-yard dash as fast as they could around the curtains to come back out. And I'd never seen it from the behind. And I was like, what are we making these poor people get through to get this
It's
done?
because we only had
funny,
like, what do we had? We had like 20 kids
Yes.
that year. You
Yeah,
know what I
small
mean?
numbers,
And that featured weapons, and not everybody was on weapons. So
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was funny. I'll never forget that moment. They all just stopped and just turned around and started looking at the flags just flying by them.
Jim, that used to happen at shows. All the kids in the color guards would run to the back and stand in the bleachers to watch them run back and forth.
That's great.
And I remember after 93, Michael McNulty had aged out, and he was teaching the flag line that year for the first time. And so I think he kind of thought it was going to be kind of more like what he was used to. And then that's how the flag line got staged. And the thing about it was a different group of people on flags or a different group of people on 6 rifles. It was never, we could never really do much sectional work because everybody was swapping and changing and running from one side to the other. And if you happen to be on one side, well, you pick up a flag and you're going to go out here.
Yeah.
But if you're on the other side, you'll do the opposite. It was kind of crazy.
And
Yeah.
then we walked into.
I also remember one thing that kind of changed the whole trajectory of that color guard was, sorry,
Go ahead, Jim.
what changed, I remember in auditions when the young lady walked, the dancer, the trajectory of what I could.
Her name was Lee Gelatra.
Lee Gelatra.
You know, and I was like, Dale, I heard she called this girl. She was a performer, and she helped kind of develop that movement program with them because she was a great example for them, you know, in terms of just movement. And that's kind of, it was a great sort of transition for them into becoming even a better moving color guard than they already were, I think. You know?
Yeah. She was an amazing performer. There's no doubt about that for sure. Then let's talk about the next year, because the next year was so iconic. Once again, you know, the whole conversation that was happening on the floor, with the table, around the table, the performers, the role playing that was happening. It was something that the activity had never, ever seen before. And I don't think the activity's ever seen it again, actually. Like anyone has ever really tried to do that, you know? And once again, Marquis never had, like, you'd walk in a gym and there's, you know, 70 kids trying out for the guard. It just wasn't that. But some of the most talented people would find their way to Marquis, you know. And this year, you know, I mean, Andy Toth was, you know, certainly a star on the show. There's so many different stars that happened in this show. And it was so iconic, you know, just, it truly has stood the test of time.
Rick Subel.
And Rick Subel
kicking his rifle
across the floor.
I love that guy.
Yeah. That was just another, you know, iconic year. And then And then in 96, John, I think it was the first time that you actually composed the music for the Guard. Right?
That's right. Well, I've been doing the soundtrack since
Right.
since 92, really, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I've been doing the soundtracks and mixing together, but that's the first time that I wrote, like I just wrote the whole thing, like an original score.
Yeah.
Yeah, all based on a book. I called Einstein's Dreams. And it was a book, had like about 18 different ideas of time. And I swear to God, we tried to do every single idea when we should have just done one.
Oh my God, 10
That's what I remember.
10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag. Lord.
Yeah.
Oh my God, there was so much, you had so much creative, unbelievable ideas in that show, and just nothing was given enough time. Sorry.
Yeah, if you go look at the
I think
tape,
I spent my entire winter doing transitions.
Yeah. It was all about transition, for sure.
and not enough time to do them.
Yeah.
If you look at, it was that whole big thing with the skirts on the mannequins. There was the cages that the rifles put on, but there was never kind of enough time to develop. But it was, when you look at the videotape, you go, wow, that's really cool. Okay, that's over. Oh, wow, that's really cool. Okay, that's over.
Yeah, so funny. And then we rolled into chairman dances, and so is it Jim who introduced the activity to power walking? Who was that? Jim or,
I think that was Jim.
Oh my God.
right?
I think it was me. The funny thing is I think, can you guys hear me? All right. John said I was, okay. I think it was.
We can right now, don't move.
It came about sort of, I think I was the 96 Olympic Games. They actually had power walking as an event, an Olympic event. And I remember talking with John, and we were watching this or something, and the way that they had to move to make this thing happen, it was such a cool, it had movement built into it already. Like there was such an interesting way that their hips had to move, that their arms had to move, and the direct focus that they had about this. I was like, this is already a movement thing. So it's like, and when we came upon chairman dances, it sounded like forward motion. The whole piece sounded, well, at least the front half sounded like forward motion. And I was like, and I think John and I were talking about this, this could be the thing we build off of, and it's an interesting way to create movement and create a vocabulary from. And I think that's where it came. And then John did some crazy cool things with, they would shift back and forth and people would stop. And it was like you took a moment in time and it paused, like there was a glitch in time. And then next thing you know, you're off again, But it literally came from watching this crazy event, I think, from the 96 Olympics, and thinking the craziest sporting event I've ever seen in my life. Now let's make some new show about it,
Well, it worked because it was quite the iconic, program once again. It was fun. That was a fun show.
I remember that. I'll just say I remember real quickly that, I mean, we always had, not always, but, Denise, you mentioned like we always had kids somehow would show up. We never had tons of people in the room, but I remember that color guard being exceptionally talented for like, I mean, and even after 96, I thought, oh my God, what's going to happen? Because 96 was such a strange year. But I remember them being so talented, and I think in the long run, that was one of the most difficult equipment books as well at that time. And it was fast, and it was just, they were moving. And I remember, I kind of think that, I mean, John could talk to this too, but I think a little bit 97, 98, and 99 in a way are very similar to me. Because I think it was a bit of a reaction to 96. I think it was a bit like, okay, we're okay, too many ideas. We're just gonna have to, here's what we know we're good at, and we're gonna explore some ideas more over length of time perhaps. But I just remember thinking that color guard, I watched a tape of it not too long ago, and I thought, damn, like they were spinning and moving, and
So good.
it was tough, and just a lot of tricky equipment things were going on in that show as well. So
Greg, I have to tell you a story about 97. And every year when you started doing our uniforms back in 90, every year I would say, really, nothing green. Like the Emerald Marquis is not going to wear green. And it went on. And we got to 97, and you said to me, I have put every possible shade of green in this uniform, and then we're done wearing green forever as long as I'm here.
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. The uniform had like, the top had like 5 pieces to it. And I thought, all right, this is going to be it. Let's pull every green I can find. And actually that uniform was it was a bit kind of convoluted the way it worked and wrapped around the body. It wasn't actually joined all the way around. So nobody knew that really but me, but I loved it. Yeah, so there was the green year. There you go.
And those kids that came, you know, people like Courtney Kaiser and Meredith Phillips, and they were the right personality to pull that show off. You know, Brian Sutton came, and so when Jim's first doing the power walking and all of that, they were buying right into it. It was kind of fun to them, not in a joking way, but it would, you know, so they kind of were getting off on it. If you remember, they created the whole Yam Society around the color of one of the flags, and they kind of pulled it themselves into this, you know, and we did a lot of travel in that year. We went out to Portland, Oregon, and then WGI was in Phoenix. So we were doing a lot of traveling, and they were a pretty special group of people as personalities, you know, and that's really kind of helped make that whole thing pretty great too.
Yeah. And then we went into a Fibonacci sequence, John, the next year. And it's also the first year that, because prior to that, Emerald there was nothing on the floor. It was a white floor. It was you know, so this was the first year that there was, you know, something on the floor. It was actually drill form, basically. It was forms, it was lines, and it was all, you know, and the one judge that picked up exactly what you were doing with the sequence thing was who?
Georgia Oliviero.
Giorgio.
Math guy.
Yeah.
The math guy.
Yeah.
He picked up,
He
he
might have been the only
right
one.
up on it, you know, the sequence, the Fibonacci sequence, he picked up
Yeah.
right on it, you know, so which was very cool.
Dale, wasn't that the year of the ink?
I was
Adam
going to
next
bring
year.
that up too. Yeah.
Oh my
It
God.
was.
Oh my God. This is Greg's idea. So we knew we wanted to, you know, the golden section, the Fibonacci sequence it has a whole visual, it's amazing, beautiful. And Greg drew this up, and then there was ink involved. There's so much ink. This is
That was
before
before
digital
that was
printing and
before
stuff like
digital
that,
printing.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
It was, we wanted to have the floor maintain the vibrancy of the color. So we wanted to know what kind of ink wouldn't fade, folding the floor and unfolding the floor. Because remember, we used to have to put baby powder in it and all of that. And so we had to go by the ink that they use for the silk screeners use. And then we had to mix it, remember, with chemicals, and we could only paint it in places with all the windows open that was ventilated, you know, because the kids were all, people would walk into where we were practicing and they would say, oh my God, I'm going to get sick, I'm lightheaded. And we had to do the floor in 4 different quadrants because it created such a toxic chemical smell that we had to do it over 4 weeks. But we did that entire thing
Who painted it? Who painted it, Dale?
That we hired this kid from Boston.
Yep.
That's
Who
what I
actually,
thought.
yeah, he came out.
It was so beautiful.
He was a friend of Greg. There was a kid in '94, a guy in '94 that made our uniforms. You designed them, and you found this guy in Boston to make them. Do you remember?
Oh, great. Yeah, that was actually Jim and I went to his place.
Okay.
Greg wasn't there for that, but I think
No,
Greg
I
found
know.
us the name. I sort of remember his name.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name.
I remember
but
the house.
He
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
he was a friend of somebody's, and
Right. And he
Yeah.
pointed us in the direction of this guy who would paint the floor, you know. And I remember he did it over the course of 4 weeks. I remember I paid him $500 because that's all I had, but he was a college student and he goes, $500, that's great. Little did he know it took him probably like, you know, 80 hours worth of time. But it was pretty cool.
fun fact that year, the uniforms again, all of the pieces of the uniforms, I mean, this is one of my, I don't care what it looks like, I'm doing it. All the pieces in the uniform were the same proportion as the golden mean. So the pant leg was one big section like that shape, but like as a tube, and the top parts were all joined. They had the same, I kept the same proportion in all the pieces, just larger or smaller, and then pleated them and then joined them together and then put them over the bodysuit. But that was a bit of that was another one of those, I don't know what this is gonna look
you know,
like.
and the other thing with that, and this is just how were, you know, that stuff, that like the whole staging was completely based on the, you know, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. You know what I mean? There were so many parameters that we put on ourselves for that show. What was beautiful that we decided to put Bach with that. the contrapunctus.
Fugue,
Yeah.
Art of the fugue. Yeah.
Art of the fugue kind of thing. It kind of gave you humanity, and Bach was so brilliantly mathematical, but it gave a humanity to it. And I just remember, didn't the whole show start with Karen Duggan, right? Is that right? I don't know. I just remember that whole thing, and I just like, I don't know. It was really, really, it was the first time I felt like we were actually did our science and emotion, and they all worked together. You know what I mean?
That was a pretty special show. I remember going to a regional late in the year and going to critique and explaining the whole process of the Fibonacci, theory, and the judge looking at me and saying, "Well, you need to start telling people that so you can get credit for it." And I said, "Well, if you don't get it, then we didn't do a good enough job. But now that you know, feel free to spread the word." I don't know where it went from there, but it was somebody that was like, "Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. It's people coming in from all over the place," and it was that was.
To be honest, we were never good at that.
No, we weren't.
Of telling people what it is that we were, all the things Greg's already talked about. We never talk about that stuff. All this motivation, Jim Faffer, choreography. We never ever talked to that. You know what I mean? We just did our thing, and it was what it was. Lived in our own little bubble.
Yeah, the depth of design that went into each one of these programs was just truly unbelievable, And then came 1999, the Chairman Dances, and that show had.
You mean The Great Divide?
The Great Divide, I'm sorry. And that program had just, again, amazing talent in it and iconic moments. And Greg, you eventually didn't become their favorite instructor because you had them on the floor forever on that famous flag, the whole flag sequence that happened in that program. It was just so hard, so difficult, but so truly amazing. Just again, never seen in color guard land ever, before.
Yeah, lots of bruises, and it's one of those things. It's the same, the same kind of impulse that I often work from, which is, what haven't I done before? Like, what is weird? What's going to be uncomfortable, and what kind of constraints can I put on myself to force perhaps something fresh or new? And that's what that was. But I do remember, have a quick memory of that. Was when I first started doing it, of course, I was so bruised within 2 minutes. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know if I could take this. But I looked over and there was Karen, and I think Rick Sewell was still marching that year. I think that was his last year, maybe, I don't remember. And I looked around and not a single person was doing anything together, not one person. I mean, it was just a big, just cacophony of bodies and flags everywhere. And I thought, well, this is really going to look ugly for a while. So yeah. I just hope that, we can have patience with this and see what happens. And I wasn't even sure, but again, I got on that plane and didn't think about it for 5 days. But again, it's also a testament to our staff, to Dale and Denise and the other tech staff who were involved, to trust the designers to do some of these things that are not so usual, and just kind of go with the flow. And about 100 bruises later, we finally got off the floor. But yeah.
Greg, in 1998, I think it was 98, 97, the kids they policed themselves a real lot. But I remember 98 was the first year that we stopped rehearsing on Friday nights, because the kids were driving up from New Jersey and people were coming from Pennsylvania, and everybody would kill themselves to get there by 9:30, and then it would be the worst rehearsal that we would have. So then we kind of just said, and you guys were all flying in, and you wanted to do things, and they were late, and when are these ones coming? And it was kind of that point where we said, what if we just started an hour earlier on Saturday, but everybody was in and got some sleep and was a little bit fresh. And I think 98 and 99 were a little bit more productive because of that too. I think, because I think 98 Claudia was marching, and she was driving in from Erie, Pennsylvania. It was 10 hours each way. And, we finally just had to say, it's okay, just come here and be safe, before something bad happens.
Yeah.
Dale, I have a story about that, because you would get me up, or Jim, because we were always in on the opposite weekends. And we would be the first ones up, right? Jim, I don't know if you had to at that point that year, 98, 99, but it would be the Dunkin' Donuts. You'd get us up even a half an hour before we had to get up because we had to go in blizzard weather to get Dunkin' Donuts before rehearsal or to eat. But one of the things I wanted to say about Greg about that flag thing is it ended up being so liquid. It looked like it didn't, hurt at all. And in contrast to that year, 99, was Jim going in and out of the floor like in a count and back up again 100 times. And I was just watching this like a couple of weeks ago and I was like, man, like just the scope of even over all those years, that I wasn't involved, and then for all of you, but Greg and Jim especially, like how your styles evolved over those years, and just what you were trying, and I just remember working on them getting in and out of the floor, and even coming over sometimes during them cleaning the flag phrase and go, how to like manipulate. Those were great, some of the best talent ever. And it was still, quite challenging because they were jumping in and out of the floor right up until the end of the show, actually. And the flag phrase came.
There were more times, Carol, that Greg or Jim would write before John staged anything. So they got to write and be as expressive or whatever they wanted it to be. And then he would stage to whatever they wrote, which was, we all experimented with that, but those years at the end, it really became about, they were going to write and then he was going to just stage what they wrote. That was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was truly one of the, those kids were so physically fit at the end of that season. It was just amazing, their ability to get on that floor and get off the floor and like in a heartbeat, throughout. And when I just watched that show actually today and saw some of them, just their final moment. It was just like they were breathing so hard. They had nothing else left in them, so. But the good news is that they put a medal around their necks, and it was well worth their efforts. And that was that the only year that Emerald Marquis actually won WGI?
It is. We medaled 10 years in a row, but that was the only year that we won.
Yeah. Unbelievable, right? Truly unbelievable. So, and we had the 2 final years of the Guard, so Dale, you were solo paying for, keeping that program alive. Anyone that runs an independent World Color Guard, it's so super difficult, to keep it solvent and keep it alive. And especially where Emerald, as we talked about, we had kids were coming in from different parts of the country in later years to join Emerald, so that there was a strong local base. But as you talk about, we had people driving in from Erie, Pennsylvania, kids started coming from a lot of different places. So it was more and more difficult for, to have something to really, support the Guard. And we did bingo for a lot of years, and then that went down. So anyway, so the last couple of years of the Guard, that last year of the Guard was actually pretty special. There was some pretty talented kids in that color guard too, and so talk about that last year.
Well, I had after 99, those guys were going off to do Blast.
Yep.
And I remember you saying to me, this would be a good time to, we could go out on top. And I said, I don't want it to look like we just waited till we won and then folded. So at that point, that was 18. And I said, no, I'm going to do it for 2 more years and we'll go out up to 20 years. So it became pretty well known that we were going to, 2001 was going to be our last year because that was 20 years. And we had more people that knew that they had to go try out now or they were never going to get to march in Emerald Marquis. Because I remember that year we did have a lot of people who came and auditioned. And so it ended up being that we had a lot of talent, but we had a lot of great people at the same time. We had vets who came back that hadn't marched in years. And we picked up some really, really, talented kids and they all knew that it was the last year, but I think that they, people like Candace came back to march after having not marched for a while. And for her, she wanted to march the last year, but she was all about it being something that nobody had seen before, if we could do that. And I think that people, the whole, I'll let John talk about the concept of it, but the whole Malagueña thing and different pieces of it, it was just perfect for us because it was just kind of a show that you would have expected us to do. I think a lot of people came. I used to always say to the color guard, the very first rehearsal, if you came to win, you came to the wrong coast. You should be in San Jose. If you came here to do something you've never done before, you're in the right place. And I really felt that way. It was pretty special. But I'm going to turn it over to John because he actually put the soundtrack together before we even kind of knew what we were doing there.
Really? Is that how that happened, Dale?
Yeah, it was because you came up with the different versions of Malagueña. And
yeah,
we were trying to figure out which ones were going to be. And you said, I have an idea. And then you said, what if we, and you piece different pieces together.
Yeah, and it really was the Arañuas piece that, the guitar Malagueña thing that put it together. But I always just tried to picture, because I was in and out that year. Jeff staged the show and I could, I was still super busy with Blast, but still wanted to be a part of it because I knew it was, but what's the kind of piece of music that we've done that a style that Greg has never interpreted, at least with me. And I thought Malagueña, I thought, oh my gosh, and let's go out celebrating because it's just such a celebratory piece. That's what I mostly remember. And I was just so curious and excited to see how Greg would interpret, that right there. That's what I remember mostly.
Well, I remember, I'm going to jump back a decade when we did Amazing Grace. Again, it was Mayor Lucy or whatever that said, I don't hear Amazing Grace anywhere in that whole piece. And when we did the Malagueña thing, we were at an Easter Mass show and somebody goes, when are they going to transition to Malagueña?
Yeah. Well, totally. Well, that was part of the composition of it. You know what I mean? Just finding all these different birds, so it went somewhere else. And then, because if it was Malagueña from the beginning, you just know what to expect. There's so much preconceived ideas about what Malagueña is. You know what I'm saying? It didn't sound very Emerald to me at all. You know what I mean? So it starts with a germ somewhere else, and just the last little bit goes into Malagueña. So it's like the leading up to, what happened before Malagueña kind of thing, and then we ended that way. Yeah.
Well, it's the most unbelievable part of the story is that so it was 20 years and only 233 members in this color guard, But the biggest story about this is the volume of performers that went through this program that have gone on to teach, have gone on to be choreographers and designers that are still working in this activity today. And the volume of performers that were, marching in cadets, back and forth, and how strong that color guard, because we were teaching them all winter long, and they were going back in the summer to march with cadets, just super powerful performers. But, people like, Matt Hurley and Lewis, who are with AMP, and Andy Toth, Casey Perkins, Jen Perma. I mean, the list of people, the talent that were Billy and David, Emma, and I mean, just the people that came through this program are just unbelievable. Tricia Gooley and Karen Prince and, Tracy Grubb, just the list goes on, and on of all the performers that came through this program that are actively still teaching in DCI or WGI today. Dale, you had an interesting stat of 1 year of how many Emerald Marquis past members were actually teaching at WGI. We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. There's 4 alumni that are still currently judging for WGI. I mean, members, there were 28 people in 08, 28 alumni that were teaching color guards that were at WGI that year. And that's what made me start thinking I gotta, add on. There were a lot of people. I got to over 50 at one point of alumni that were either, running a color guard, teaching a color guard, got into judging. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I remember talking to Jill Ruff one time. Remember Jill? And she said to me, it's always different every day. And that's why I love to go there. And so then she went into teaching and she said, I just want to make kids feel the same way that I felt. And so I think a lot of people, got out of it, maybe what we didn't plan to, but the testament is to you and all the others that taught too. But I want to make sure that everybody understands that we never had the means, so we didn't pay anybody. I can remember plenty of times that I would say to Greg, you're going to come in every other week, and I'd buy plane tickets, and he would buy his own plane ticket to come in because he had something else that he wanted to do, and it might be reimbursing for expenses or, gas money or something. But, I remember talking to a good friend of mine a few years ago, and he said, what do you mean you didn't pay people? I said, we didn't have the money, but we all, it was a place where people could create and do things without judgment. I guess I created that environment that all of you got to be able to do all of that. And that is probably one of the things I'm the proudest of, was, for many of you getting involved in designing, it came through here. But I loved what you were able to create, because for almost all of those 233 kids, it became a place that they'll never forget, because it's like nothing any place ever been. I remember I had to make a deal with April. I used to have to not have rehearsal on Thanksgiving weekend so the cadet kids could go to camp. That was their one requirement to be in cadets. So for many years, I couldn't have a Thanksgiving camp because if we let all the cadet kids go there, then she would let them out of all the camps all during the winter. Mm-hmm. And so there was that relationship that she also knew that the cadet kids that were in Emerald were going to talk to the good kids about going to cadets and vice versa. And there's a lot of people that still to this day, I had 2 people in the last year that said, my biggest regret was that I didn't go march in Emeralds, and I wished I had done that, so those are the types of things that, just kind of make you shrug your shoulders and say, I guess it was different than we thought it was, but if it accomplished that it was pretty special, then we did a good job.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Emerald was like a feeder ground for the cadets for years, for years and years and years, so. But it certainly allowed all of us to figure a lot of stuff out, by the time, when I landed out in California and started out that program, and you all came out there, and we had a 10-year run of, figuring it out. And I don't know if it got any easier. And actually, I think you guys probably wanted to choke me the first year that we started the program, because we got that we had no kids. Once again, so coming from Emerald, just we had no kids, it was like that thing. And so we start the program out with Vanguard, and still, they had no kids. The Raiders had folded. And we eventually got, kids in that program that, that first year, those first couple of years, they were hard, to establish the program, establish even who we were or what we were. And, Dale, and sometimes people used to refer to the Vanguard as the Emerald West. I never felt it was, Emerald was so unique in its own way, creatively, and maybe it was just because it was all of us. I don't know.
That's really the only reason. I mean, Emerald was different every year. The one thing you knew going into a new year with Emerald is you weren't going to see anything you'd seen before, and Vanguard was the same way. That rep really became just because of who was teaching there.
Yeah.
And as Vanguard planted its roots too, they went off and did something different every year. And, if it looked like them, it was still them. They weren't copying anything else. It was still the designers were still the designers, still pushing the envelope a little bit. You know, you either liked them or you didn't in many cases, but you know, they were still creating great product.
Yeah, we would, you know, just we would fly in there on Friday night, you know, all be on East Coast time, you know, get in there Friday night and do rehearsal till 11 o'clock at night. So now it's 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and sleep for 3 hours and do it all again on Saturday, you know, just, and we did that for a lot of years, you know, a lot of years, you know, and then finally I think we figured it out where we said, Carol, how about we do some movement classes on Friday night? You know, until we all got there and got acclimated, and you know, so yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely that was special. You know, those, especially those first few years, and that first year, because after Emerald ended, I was here living in San Jose, and I was doing that opposite one. That's why I hated that Dunkin' Donuts on Saturday morning. But yeah, so I was at Raiders for 4 years, from 2002 to well, 2 through 5, and then when we started up and Raiders had folded, it was just like the perfect kind of timing there for a lot of those kids, if you remember, came to Vanguard our first year, like Sonia and Alexis and Megan, and a lot of the boys too. And so it was nice to have that core group, that kind of, you know, and yeah, we had, after what you guys were just spent coming in and trying to do that.
And it was, you know, it was after 2005 drum corps year for Santa Clara, which was a tough year for them. And then this program, you know, started. So they didn't have a lot. They didn't have a lot of cash to put towards this program. So Dave Meikle, you know, just worked hard to find whatever he could find, you know, as far as rehearsal times and space was, you know, that the guard needed and all that. It was just like, we were definitely gypsies that year, you know, but we figured it out, we made it work. We made our mark, you know, at WGI, and we kind of went from there. And as the guard got stronger, you know, there was more members. Actually, there was some talent that was coming in from the Blue Devils, that those guys were just truly unbelievable. And the drum corps, you know, the Vanguard drum corps, you know, some of the members were, you know, coming into the Winter Guard and doing winter and summer. And so the talent level of the guard, you know, was getting stronger and stronger. We still didn't have great big numbers, and similar to Emerald, you know, we just had a core group of talented kids every year, you know, that came through those programs, you know. So, but we, you know, just I think the first year, so we came out, you know, in 06, and you know, 07 outside looking in, Bella Bartok year. And then we got into this 08, we did On a Breath with the guard, you know, and that kind of the design of that program and what that was, kind of a little bit of energy going into the year after, you know, that particular year. But the talent level of the kids was getting stronger and stronger, and their movement, you know, Carol, you were doing an amazing job with them, you know, just working those kids just constantly, you know, and it allowed the, you know, the design team to come in there on those weekends and just get work done, you know. But you and Kathy Pearson were just, you know, working those kids, you know, and just, and it made it obviously easier for, you know, from a design perspective to move things along a little bit, you know, a little bit further.
I feel like,
you know what,
I feel,
sorry, Carol,
sorry. Oh, I was just going to say, like, some of those kids had been there too from the beginning, like Samia, you know, some were one and dones from the first couple of years, and then some hung out for a long time and followed from 2006 to 2009 or 10, you know. And so, and the smaller guards that we, you know, we didn't have to have like 35 people, that lent a lot to that as well, as I'm sure it did, you know, back in the Emerald days as well.
Yeah. John?
I was just going to say, I think, hang on, am I muted?
No, you're good.
Okay. I think that the On the Breath year, that was like a turning point, like what 94 was, at least to me in Emerald. You know what I mean? We had a few of those in Emerald. We would go along and then change, but that was a big, you know, we look at the year before, look what we're doing, and I was just like, what are we doing? Like, this is not it. This is, you know, you gotta burn some old things, you know what I mean? It's like, well, this might have been, I don't know. Yeah, all that kind of thing. But that was a big change. And that was, you know, as a super small guard, I remember that.
Yes, they
You know,
were.
coming off of the Bartok year, we didn't get many people back, shocker.
Mhm.
And yeah, and we just found that corner, and we had a number of years at Emerald, the same thing, just this core of people that were just gold, you know, and it kind of set us on our way.
Yeah.
That's what I remember.
Yeah. Into the next year, which was the Kiss. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, it was just such an interesting show. You know, and I remember I was talking to one of the judges once, and they said after the show was all over, that's all I wanted to do is just, you know, go up and kiss everybody. You know what I mean? But yeah, super, super talented group of people for sure. You know.
That 2009
that was one of
was
those-
the first. Oh, sorry. Sorry, John. Go ahead.
Go, Carol. You always beat me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say
Yeah,
that was one of the first years I really, because I knew Greg, but we hadn't really like, I don't know, we weren't always in together at Emerald and stuff like that. And I was doing my voodoo there, and he was over there writing. But I remember doing the section, the fight section in the Kiss, and I remember working with Greg on some of that together. And that was really a lot of fun. I think that was the first time that we really started working together like that closely. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my first year at the Vanguard, Winter Guard, because I didn't come until 2009 because I was I could never, like Denise was saying, the West Coast trips, I just couldn't. I mean, there was no way I was going to make that work while I was working full time. I was a textile director at that time for Bill Blast New York, and I was like, we worked late on Fridays, and there was just no way I was going to ever make that work. But actually, what happened, as we all know, the banking or mortgage crisis, or you know, the crash in 2008, I think it was early or the end of 2008. I and thousands of people lost their jobs in the fashion business, and I started as a consultant. And once I started as a consultant, I remember talking to Denise that fall before the 2009 season. And I said, well, you know what? I can set my own hours now. So I think I might be able to fly to the West Coast if you're interested, if you don't mind. She's like, yeah, come on out. So yeah, that's how I started there. But that was my first year, was 2009. It was amazing to be reunited with all of us again. We hadn't worked together for a while. It was just such a, I don't know, just such a pleasure. And it hadn't been for such a long time, and I just felt like I was home again. So thank you, Denise, for inviting me back out there.
You're welcome. Yeah, it was great energy, you know, with a lot of, you know, great kids. Jim, when did you move to Hawaii? When were you out? Where were you living? In 2009?
Sorry. You know what? I think I've been here 12 years now, which is weird. It doesn't feel like that, but sometimes it does. But it's 12 years, so do the math. I'm not really sure. I think I started Vanguard still living in Indiana, maybe. I don't really remember, but it was a couple of years after that I kind of moved over here because it was a time when it was a year, Vanguard year, and I was doing Aimachi at the same time. And I was kind of done living in Indiana at the time. The Blast show, I didn't need to be living there anymore, and I was a little burnt out. So I ended up getting a judging gig out here, and I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to try this, like as not a tourist. So I just told the guys, I was like, hey, yeah, I'll do it. I moved out in November. I said, let's make my return ticket for April for WGI. And then that's kind of how it started. And I just stayed, you know, and in between then I did another Blast tour or two, but I just kept coming back. And so I've been here now 12 years. And these 5 months of the quarantine feel like 12 years right now.
No, I know.
I'm ready to get off the...
The other interesting thing is that while you guys were all doing Blast, there were so many performers from Emerald Marquis or from the Vanguard that were, you know, in some of those original casts, you know, of Blast, and you know, just and that was a thrill of a lifetime for them, you know, that they actually could get paid to perform, you know, finally. And some of them were just so brilliant performers, you know, just amazing performers, right? So again,
Well, and then there was the reverse where Jean, who was what did she play in Blast?
She's a
Jean
baritone
Beasley?
player.
She was a baritone, and Jim would tell the story how she would always say, "I'm going to do Vanguard," and she would be backstage, practicing or so. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but yeah.
Okay.
And so she came, and she was 2008, I think, all the way till 11. Yeah, I think she did 4 years. So
Yeah.
that was that was kind of an anomaly. Interesting.
Yeah, I think the first year of Blast, not the Brass Theater, but the first year of Blast, I think there were 5 Emerald kids and 5 Pride of Cincinnati kids that were in that guard cast. Pretty. Am I right, John? I think there was 5. Then there was a few other kids, but of that.
I think you're right. I just know, I remember that there was a tribe from Emerald. They were just so extraordinary. You know what I mean? Like, they're so extraordinary. And then you put them on stage and you go, oh my God, like they're star performers on Broadway. They're that good. And yeah, it's amazing.
yeah.
The one thing I remember a lot about 2009, just to get a little sentimental for a second, one of the best things for me, and I still haven't quite figured it out, but maybe it's happening on this phone call, was that was the year we won, the first year we won, right? Am I right? The Kiss, right? And it was that moment when I saw Dale. I was with the guard because I was on the floor with the guard, and I saw Dale, and he came up and gave me that big Dale hug. And I can't even tell you what that meant to me. It's like all these years, I still, even though it's not Emerald, I always felt like Santa Clara was kind of Emerald. You know what I mean? It's just missing Dale, and however much I wanted Dale, he had other stuff, he couldn't do it. But the vibe was still, it's us. You know what I mean? And that moment when Dale came up and gave me that hug, I just felt so reassured. And Lord knows with Emerald what we won once. You know what I mean? So there's something in all that, and not like we really cared then, but then that, I don't know, there was some sort of affirmation there, and it just felt great. And I probably never said that to you, Dale, but I guess that still sticks in my mind, that moment coming down the thing there, and you being the first guy there with all these medals in your hand, just giving me the big hug, and I felt, all right, we're doing something good. That's what I remember.
Yeah. Super cool for sure. Well, Dale, you get to deal with the whole entire activity now. Well, when we're off doing the Vanguard, you were running the color guard, the entire color guard division for WGI.
When Emerald Marquis folded in 01, well, a couple of years before that, was in 98 actually, Denise, you and I were both part of when we redesigned what WGI was going to become what it is today, the 3 divisions.
That's right.
And the Winds division was going to be the marching band division at one point. Remember, we had the Friendship Cup shows and we were doing that stuff, but that it took a few years for WGI to put it in place, but it was in 2002 when they started to have 3 separate divisions. So right as Emerald was folding, they asked me if I would take, they were looking for somebody to be the director of color guard in a full-time position, but they had to live in Dayton, Ohio. And I was still working in corporate America. So they asked me if I would do the job for 6 months while they did a nationwide search to find somebody. And 18 years later, I'm still doing the job. So they're, and it's been really rewarding. I mean, I've been a big part of changes in the activity, and there are those really special moments, John, where I get to present something to somebody that's one of my own, and you can't help but, feel proud of them and happy for what they've worked really hard for. But, WGI's gone through a lot. Ron's worked really hard to kind of reshape, the organization, and I've been able to be a part of reshaping what we kind of do with it, so it's been pretty rewarding. I was able to step out of Emerald Marquis and stay involved really right from the get-go. Yeah,
you're the guy. It's all about you, Dale. Yeah, you're part of the big eye of WGI for sure. Without a doubt. So we're at the top of our second hour here, but so the Vanguard went on to win a couple more a couple more years, and that iconic year, our last year that we won, I think 2015. There's still something so cool about that show, and the set itself with the darkness of the floor and the white table down the center, and you know what I mean, just how that looked in the arena, just the opening of that program, and again, a bunch of super talented performers in that program, and you guys just did some brilliant stuff there from a design perspective.
You know where that table came from? It was Greg, shocker again. But we were talking about what we're going to do. And it really, I swear it took us till like January before we finally sat down and said, okay, we're going to do this. But he kept talking about a banquet or a place, a table where everybody would come together. And what are the different meanings of that table? You know what I mean? Or that, what is that place that everybody kind of comes together? I only say that because people ask me what that was, and that's exactly it, and then in Greg's terms, it gets a little specific and different than what anybody else is thinking. It ends up being this big long thing down, right down the thing. And I mean, that was just so cool. So many things, all you guys, you know what I mean? So many little moments of inspiration that are so out of the box, so out of the norm, that just push all of us, you know what I mean? Just, it's always like that one thing that I don't know where they come from, these little bits of thoughts, kernels of thoughts.
I'll just throw this in real quick, because you said that. I think the real inspiration, I think I speak for most of us, is you introduced what was the group? The crazy talk,
The books.
The books.
Right?
Yeah, the books. Yeah.
And that was the rehearsal. That was right before rehearsal, where we were sitting in that hotel room.
We're sitting in the
still
hotel
had no
Do you remember?
idea.
And I said, guys, this is it. We're walking out of this room with the freaking show because you're driving me crazy.
Yes. And you start playing all those pieces, and you start playing all those crazy pieces. And Jim and Carol and I are like, okay, that is weird. At which, of course, the second I hear something that's unfamiliar, I'm all about it, right? Yeah. Because I love the unknown, right? But I think we were all kind of like, right, Jim and Carol, like we were all like, we have to do this. We'll make this work somehow. Like somehow we'll relate all this together. But the music, once you introduce that group, I was like, this is going to have to be it somehow.
It was so beautiful looking. It's one of those shows that you're part of, but I don't really feel like I was part of it. It's one of those I look at and I still look like at an audience, and maybe so much of it because those members were so amazing. And then I remember my heart sank at finals when the table broke, and then Sammy walking down just with a smile. I mean, and the whole place was right there. Like those kind of performers is unbelievable. Yeah. We just had that through all the years of Emerald. We always had those 1, 2, or 3 or 4 people that could just carry a moment, and lift everything. Thankful.
We were fortunate, to have those, and those people who are their moments are those people that are out there creating today and doing some amazing things. It's so super. It's all the progression, that has happened and occurred, and through the years. I think we could talk for another 2 hours, folks, but anyway, I think we're gonna wrap this up. Just so John and Greg and Jim, you guys have gone on to do amazing things at the Bluecoats, and Carol, you're there with them. We all hope that there'll be a day that we'll get to see the Bluecoats, and we'll get to see the Cadets, and we'll get to see anybody on a football field. I don't know when that day will be, and Dale, we're hopeful that we'll get to go to a color guard show sometime in our future. I don't know if it will be virtual. I don't know if it will be in person, but so we're all missing this, for sure. There's no doubt about that. And but it gives you guys some time to just kind of sit back, lay back, and come up creatively with what the next thing will be, right? Yeah.
I'm ready to go back to work. Let's get this done.
I know.
I'm at it.
That's where everybody is,
Yeah.
But love you guys. You know, we've taught together for years and years and years and years. Thank you for your time. Thank you for telling your stories. This webinar is hosted by the cadets, and if any of you out there have a need to buy a flag, buy a rifle, buy some gloves, you want to start practicing and get ready for the next Winter Guard season or drum corps season, stop by thecadets.org and stop by our store. We have plenty of stuff for you to choose from. For those that are cadets and watching here tonight, we still have some of our reunions going on. This week we're finishing up the reunion. The reunions, there's 2 per night happening, and for those of you that have been on, and there's been, as we talked about, a whole bunch of cadets that March and Marquis, they've all been on, these reunion calls, and it's been so much fun, to see everybody and to reconnect with everybody. And, so if you marched in the 2000s and your years are coming up, head on out to the cadets website and hook on to the reunions, because they're super fun, So Jim, did you get on to any of the reunions?
I missed them all. The time change is a little hard sometimes.
Right. You're in Hawaii.
I did.
And yeah, John, I was on with you. Greg, you've been on,
I've been on, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, they're just fun. They're just fun. So anyway, I love you guys a whole bunch. Continue to be you, and be safe, be well, and thank you all for your time.
Dale.
Thanks, everyone.
Dale, thank
Thank
you,
you, Dale.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you,
We
Dale.
all owe you,
Okay,
buddy.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Denise.
everyone.
Love you.
Talk to y'all soon.
Good night.
Bye. Bye, Dee.
Bye.
Thanks, Denise.
Bye.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you.